Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm gonna call this meeting to order. Call the Board of Trustees work session and finance meeting to order this afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining us who is part of this meeting right now. We're gonna first start the meeting off with our audit reports from BKHM, and Ms. Nancy, our auditor, is here to present for us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. It's nice to be back in person. It's always good to see you guys, and I want to start off by extending my thanks to the central office staff during our audit for this year. Everything went relatively smoothly. We did kind of a predominantly a remote audit with a little bit of in-person, as much as we could. But just due to the circumstances, that was how it worked out for this year. So we appreciate Ricky and Melissa and Julie and everybody else over at the central office that kind of helps us and provides the information for us. So we really appreciate the fact that they make our job quite a bit easier. I want to start first of all by going through a letter. It's a 5-page letter. Looks very plain. It's not on our letterhead. It's not dated. It's got a big draft stamp across the front. That's just because it's not been finalized yet. And I want to go through these items because we have finalized our audits of the 7 charter schools. We've just not finalized the audit of the consolidated entity at this point, Lake Wales Charter Schools, Inc. So I can either make another visit once that's done or do something remotely to present the final results if you so desire for me to come back. But these are the items that we are required by our auditing to what our standards call those charged with governance, which is the Board of Trustees. So we have completed our audits of the 7 individual schools, as I had mentioned before. The opinions on each of those 7 audits were an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. Our standards require that we provide you with certain information under our auditing standards and also under government auditing standards and the uniform guidance related to federal programs. Some of that information we've already communicated to you in our engagement letter, which was dated back in April of 2020. That was a 2-year engagement letter. That's why the date is so long ago. It covered fiscal 2020 and 2021. In terms of significant audit matters, I'd like to point out that management is responsible for their selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. The significant policies that are used by each of the schools are described in Note 1 to the financial statements and also in the pension plan's footnote to those financial statements. There was a new accounting policy that was adopted for this year, GASB Statement Number 84, related to fiduciary activities. That was adopted in fiscal 2021. Not a significant effect on the financial statements, but that accounting standard relates to how your internal accounts are accounted for and reported in the audit. We look at transactions near the end of the year just to make sure that there's nothing that's been misrecorded or something, just to make sure that things have been recorded in the proper period, so there's a proper cutoff. So we do examine and conduct procedures in our audit related to that. On page 2 of that letter, there are certain accounting estimates that are included in the audits that we like to point out to the board so that they're aware of them. Accounting estimates are an integral part of preparing financial statements. Those estimates are based on management's knowledge and experience about the past and also current events, and also make some assumptions about the future. Certain accounting estimates are particularly sensitive, so we like to outline those items to the board so that they're aware of them. The first of them relates to the allowance for uncollectible receivables. That's based on historical experience and analysis of the collectability of individual accounts. The second item relates to depreciation expense. It's based on the useful lives of capital assets, which also is estimated by management. Sometimes there are certain donated assets that the schools receive. Those are generally based on sales prices, fair market values to the extent that we can determine those. Compensated absences payable is another estimate based on the unused paid time off, pay calculation per day, certain percentages based on an individual's years of service, all affect how that estimate is calculated. And then lastly, the pension accounts, which involve the net pension liability and the related deferred outflows and inflows. Those are based on actuarial assumptions that come from the Florida Department of Management Services, the Division of Retirement. So in terms of these accounting estimates, what we do as auditors is we evaluate the key factors and the assumptions that management uses to develop those estimates to determine that they're reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. And we also look at disclosures, and we're required to disclose certain items about those estimates. Bottom of page 2, we did not have any significant difficulties in dealing with management in performing and completing our audits. If we did, I hope you would have known by now, before now, but did not have any difficulties in getting the information that was requested. The top of page 3 of this letter deals with corrected and uncorrected misstatements. Our professional standards require us to accumulate any adjustments that we might find during the audit, other than those that are clearly trivial, and we're required to communicate those with management. We did have adjustments, as we typically do as part of the audit. There is no attached schedule to this letter for today because the individual school audits did not have what we refer to as past adjustments. Those would be items that we discover when we do the audit, but we consult with management and generally determine that those items are immaterial to record. So if we have any of those as a result of the consolidated audit, when that is completed, we would include those as an attachment to this letter. We do provide our adjustments to management. It's kind of part of the draft approval process as we get towards the end of the audit. And those do get recorded into the accounting records so that moving forward, we're all in agreement. The next paragraph, disagreements with management. If we have, generally our standards, if we have a disagreement, it's related to like a financial accounting or a reporting or auditing matter, and that can be whether or not it's resolved to our satisfaction or not. We didn't have any disagreements with management during the course of our audits. We do request that management sign a representation letter, and we have obtained those for the individual school audits. Incidentally, all of those audit reports were dated September 30th, and those management representation letters were dated as of that same day. Once we finalize the consolidated audit, we will also obtain a representation related to that audit. Management may decide to consult with other accountants. They may want to get a second opinion on a certain situation or a certain matter. You're certainly free to do so. We do have standards, though, that govern how that consultation occurs. So if it involves an application of an accounting principle or a determination of the type of auditor's opinion that could be expressed on the financial statements, our standards require that the consultant check with us to determine that they have all the relevant facts. And to our knowledge, there were no such consultations with other accountants during the fiscal year that we just audited. In terms of other audit findings or issues, we do generally discuss a variety of matters, and definitely when we had an application of a new accounting standard this year, so we had several discussions with management related to that, and these discussions are part of our normal professional relationship. Top of page 4, just a couple of other items that I want to report to the board. There are some Florida statute requirements that require us to inform you of certain things that may occur. So in accordance with the Florida statute section 218.39 paragraph 5, we are required to inform you that Edward W. Bach Academy North ended the fiscal year with a total or unassigned deficit as reported in their fund financial statements, for which sufficient resources of the school are not available to cover the deficit. That is how the statute is worded. So since we do an audit of each individual school, We're required to report that to you. It is not something that appears in our audit report. It's just a matter of communication to the board at the conclusion of the audit. Does anyone have any questions on that in particular? Okay. And I'll get to more of the numbers in just a minute. I want to finish going through this letter. The second paragraph under there, the company does have an internal fund balance policy. There's a lot of words there that explain how the amounts are calculated. But in general, the internal requirement is that for each individual school, the ratio of the unassigned general fund balance as a percentage of budgeted general fund revenues for this coming fiscal year needs to be at least 5% for each individual school and 10% for the system as a whole. That's the internal policy. So in doing those calculations, which I'll get to on my next spreadsheet that I'll show you, each individual school, with the exception of Bach North, met that minimum fund balance requirement. While we have not completed the audit of the consolidated entity, we do expect that the system as a whole, at least based on our preliminary numbers, will meet the 10% minimum that's required by the internal policy. Under the other matters paragraph, the first item, we apply limited procedures to what the standards refer to as required supplementary information, or RSI. So these items are included in each individual audit: the management's discussion and analysis, the budgetary comparison schedules, and there are a couple of pension schedules that are also included: schedule of proportionate share of net pension liability and the schedule of contributions related to pension plans. So while those are included as part of the audit as required supplementary information, our audit, we do not audit the RSI, we audit the financial statements. So even though they're included in the audit, we actually do not express an opinion on the required supplementary information. I'm going to skip the last paragraph for now. That's primarily related to our consolidated audit. Once that is completed, we include in that audit a schedule of expenditures of federal awards, because all of your federal programs are audited under the consolidated entity. And that also, so that RSI or that supplementary information will be included in the consolidated audit once we complete that. And then this report, we restrict it for use of the board and management of the company. Shouldn't be used for anyone other than these specified parties, but as you know, this is a public meeting. So with that being said, if there's any questions on that letter, I'll move from there to my next document. Okay.
I just got one question. The negative 5.71%, why was that? Who am I asking that to?
Okay. That ratio is calculated as a percentage of the unassigned general fund balance at the end of the fiscal year we just audited. So Bach North had a negative unassigned fund balance, or a fund deficit as of the end of the fiscal year at a fund level. So you take a percentage of that. It's a percentage of the budgeted general fund revenues for the coming fiscal year, and you end up with a negative percentage because of that deficit financial position at the end of the year.
Typically, if I can add a little more to that, Marcus, typically when you have a brand new school that starts up, oftentimes it starts with some form of deficit because it hadn't had enough years to actually build up a fund balance. I don't believe Bach North started the first year with the deficit. I believe in the second year, it grew a slight deficit, and then over the third year. Parts of that is not only the growth of the school, but also the construction phase of it. Not all of that activity related to the construction costs is built into the capital fund. Some of it is actually built into the general fund. And It's in some cases, it can be a classification of revenues that we had in the previous year that may have created some of that. But I don't anticipate that having an impact on the school's ability to operate moving forward. We'll quickly recover that.
Any other questions on that I can answer? Okay. So the next document that I'll talk about, we've already talked about it just a little bit as it relates to Bach North, but this is a schedule that outlines both the charter fund balance requirement and the internal fund balance requirement by individual school. The top part of the spreadsheet, there is a requirement in not all of your charters. If memory serves, this requirement is only in the conversion charter, the original conversion charters for the 5 original schools, so not including Bach South or Bach North. But we show the calculations here for everyone, just for consistency purposes. So generally, what the requirement is in the charter for the 5 conversion schools is a minimum of 3%, calculated based on the unassigned general fund balance divided by the actual general fund revenues. So you can see the percentages there for each school. And this was not reported as an exception or as a violation of the charter in the audit because it isn't technically a charter requirement for Bach North. The internal fund balance requirement numbers are also included there. So the unassigned general fund balance is the same number from up at the top. And then the ratio for the internal fund balance, the revenues in that denominator are the budgeted for fiscal 2022. So that's what those numbers represent. And again, the internal fund balance requires 5% for each school as a whole and 10% for the system. Consolidated. We do not have the system consolidated number on there yet, as I mentioned already. But I don't, based on our preliminary numbers, I don't expect that will be less than the 10% minimum that's required by the internal policy. Okay. The next document that I'll go through, I know this is a little bit overwhelming because it's a lot of numbers, but it's the best summary that we can provide of the combined school audits that we've completed to date. The first 2 statements, page 1 and 2, the combined statement of net position and the combined statement of activities, those are what we refer to as your government-wide statements. That includes all of your assets. Long-term, short-term, capital assets included, all of your liabilities, long-term debt, pension-related items, everything, and then the net position at the bottom. So on a combined basis, total assets and deferred outflows for the 7 combined schools are about $24.9 million. You can see that column all the way over to the right in blue. And total liabilities and deferred inflows of about $24.1 million. Net position is shown in for these schools in 2 different components. We have the net investment in capital assets, which is your net capital assets, net of related debt, and then an unrestricted category. And then you can see the total net position for the 7 combined schools, about $774,000 at the end of June. You will see that in this statement that a number of the schools show a negative net position. That's not uncommon for the government-wide financial statements due to the primarily the pension balances that are included herein. The second page, the statement of activities, shows the revenues and expenses for the combined schools. Again, the operations of the central office are not reflected in these schedules. Total revenues for the combined schools, $41.5 million. Total expenses, $38.9. So the change in the net position for the year, $2.6 million to the positive. And then the beginning of the year net position was a deficit of 1.8 million, which brings us to the 774,000 at the end of the year. The second 2 pages of this statement are your governmental funds statements. This includes, I believe, how you and most other charter schools in the state budget. You budget at a fund level. That's very common, but we have to present, it's kind of like 2 different sets of financial statements, fund basis statements, government-wide statements. So we have to present them both ways under the standards. But this is primarily, I think, what more people focus on, and what, like I said, what more schools budget, how they budget, and what more of the school districts and actual users of the financial statements focus on the fund level. So you can see each of the numbers there. Total assets, about 9.7 million for the combined schools. The liability amount is the unavailable revenue on the long-term receivables. That's 246,000. Total fund balance for the combined schools at the end of June, 9.4 million. You can see the deficit reflected for Bach North, which we had already spoken about, but again, very healthy overall on a combined basis. And then the last page is the fund level revenues and expenditures. So the difference between this statement and the one we just talked about for the revenues and expenses, this does not include depreciation. It also doesn't include any changes in your compensated absences balances and your pension liabilities. Total revenues for the combined schools, about 41.6 million. Total expenditures, 40.2 million. An excess for the year of 1.3. The items towards the bottom of the statement are what we refer to as other financing sources and uses. There were a couple of schools who had some capital leases this year, so you financed the purchase of some equipment through a capital lease. And then there was also a payment on the long-term payable to the central office from Bach North that also reduced their fund balance. So you can see the overall change in fund balance for the year, combined schools altogether about 1.5 million, and then that fund balance of 9.4, which then ties back to the page before, total fund balance. Any questions on the numbers or anything else I can answer?
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. Kirby, and for other board members, I can have some additional time. We got quite a bit on the schedule today, so we can dig a little bit deeper into the presentation of that deficit. But I'll indicate that many years ago, Robin wrote a memo to the Florida Department of Education, pretty much asking permission for the schools to be able to share funds between schools in the event that one school did fall in a deficit. So as Nancy presented, that 15% fund balance covers all of our schools. So Bach North is not in any emergency danger at all. Okay.
I would agree with that. Yeah, you had the ability to be able to have one school support another. When that's the case as a system, you're allowed to do that. So even though I have to report that there was a deficit in the individual audit, you can tell from the numbers that overall there's not a deficit just for that individual school.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, moving on in the agenda, we have a presentation from USI Insurance. Ms. Andrea will present to us. And
Is it working? I'll raise it a little bit. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. My name is Andrea Kowalski. I am with USI Insurance Services. We are the employee benefits consultant for Lake Wales Charter Schools and have worked with the team here for 3 or 4 years now, I think, and was talking with your team for years before that. So what I would like to do today is talk a little bit about the difference between a fully insured medical plan, which is what you have today, or what your staff has today with United Healthcare, compared to a partially self-funded benefit plan. And we're going to kind of look at some of the components and the differences between the two, and why, in our opinion, looking at a partially self-funded benefit plan would provide quite a few advantages to Lake Wales Charter Schools. But we'll also talk about some of the risks as well that are associated with a program like this. So if we look at page 2 of the first page of the program, again, the fully insured, different components of a fully insured medical plan are there on your left. You see your claims, your administration, pooling, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, taxes, and carrier profit and additional margin and mandated benefits are all included in the premiums that you all have today with United Healthcare. In a partially self-funded model, we are able to eliminate or significantly reduce the carrier profit, the administrative costs, and the mandated benefits. We have more flexibility with those. Ability and the transparency are 3 initial advantages or opportunities that we can achieve in a partially self-funded program. On page 3, the administration piece is a really, essentially, administration is just a fixed fee that United Healthcare has built into the premiums today that you all are paying with every premium. And that enables them to provide customer service, provide their network, process the claims, provide case and disease management. When we look at a partially self-funded program, the one we've been looking at with your team, they provide all of the same things and they provide the same network. They are just able to do it for a significantly lower cost. And just to give you a little bit of context to that, your current, there's a lot more, I guess you could say, shell games that the carrier, United Healthcare, is able to play in your current premium because it is a much less transparent model. But what we do know is that they initially told us that they were charging about 19.5% of the premium for this administration. Now, we know that number gets reduced when we negotiate with United Healthcare, but we never know what the final number is. But at the 19.5%, that actually works out to about $875,000 a year that is built into your medical premiums with United Healthcare. If we look at a partially self-funded program with exactly the same network, they're doing the same, it's actually a third-party administrator owned by United Healthcare, that same network, same services, same capabilities, they can actually provide the same service for $31,000 a year. It's crazy, but those are the actual numbers because we have gotten proposals from them over the past few years. So just the savings on the administration is really staggering. Are there questions on that so far before I move on? Okay. If we look at page 4, within a self-funded benefit plan, we make sure we have appropriate protection and appropriate stop loss coverage. So we have specific stop loss coverage, which is for any one person. And that would cover, so you have caps, you would have a cap, and we'll look at that in a minute, what that really looks like. But where Lake Wales Charter School would not be responsible for any claim over a certain dollar amount. In addition, we also have what's called aggregate stop loss insurance. So what that means is if you have a month where a lot of people happen to get sick and go to the hospital, we make sure that we cap the exposure on the entire group as a whole. So you have appropriate caps built in for single, we call them shock claims or large claims, and then you also have aggregate coverage to cover the group as a whole. If we look at page 5, it kind of illustrates how specific stop loss works, and we have a few different examples here. So in this situation, this is showing a $50,000 specific stop loss, and that does include pharmacy as well. We do see a lot of, not here, but we do see specialty pharmacy claims can be very expensive these days. So in these specific examples, for instance, if you have an employee who has a claim for $25,000, in this situation, Lake Wales Charter School would be on the hook for that entire amount if the cap was at $50,000. But if the cap is, if there's a claim for $55,000, Lake Wales Charter School is only responsible for up to $50,000. Anything over $50,000 is reimbursed by the stop loss carrier. And it's usually reimbursed immediately. That's the way we build these plans. So you're not outlaying the money and waiting days or weeks for a reimbursement. It happens right away. You'll see there's a few other examples there of just different amounts of large claims, but they basically, anything up to that cap, Lake Wales Charter School is responsible for, and anything over that is reimbursed by the stop loss carrier. If we look at page 6, this illustrates the aggregate stop loss. This is getting a little in the weeds, but basically you would have, we provide all of these numbers and all of this analysis in a lot of detail so that you would know exactly what the maximum exposure would be for the group for that month. And anything above that is covered by the stop loss carrier. So if you have, like I said, 15 people who all go to the hospital in 1 month, your liability is also capped for a situation like that. And that's done month by month. It's not at the end of the year. So I guess the message here is that we in looking at this program, we would make sure that Lake Wales Charter School had ample and complete protection against any large claims or combination of large claims, and that you would know what your maximum cost would be. If we look at page 7, this is kind of showing a few different models of how to build, of different examples of a self-funded benefit program. So when we talk about, for example, the second one in, carrier bundled, partially self-funded, what that means is if we were to just go to United Healthcare and say, we just want to keep everything with United and just look at a self-funded and just move it to self-funded. Everything stays exactly the same, and on the back end, they flip a switch. And we provide all this information, but everything stays with United. There still, however, is less transparency and more administrative cost in that model than in the model to the far left, which is the third-party administrator partially self-funded option. So in that option, you can see that there is the most amount of savings. And in a situation like yours, there would be no disruption for the employees because it's exactly the same network of doctors and hospitals and pharmacy that they have today. Again, this third-party administrator that we've been looking at and talking to is owned by United Healthcare. So it's all the same. It's just a lot more transparent and a lot less expensive. The last 2 pages are really kind of repeating what I said earlier. The administrative costs are also, like I said, are significantly lower in this type of a model. I mean, there are other advantages that are not even captured in here. Pharmacy, in a self-funded benefit program, we can arrange for Lake Wales Charter Schools to get rebates, to get pharmacy rebates, and those can easily add up quickly. In a fully insured program, you're not able to get rebates. So that's one piece. There's also savings on claims management. We're able to get much better data, much more timely in a self-funded model, which means we're able to act more strategically, make recommendations that are more meaningful, and help put in programs that can change behavior. We is high in certain areas of your plan. We will know that much more quickly in a self-funded model like this. Are there questions, thoughts? Yes.
Is there a difference in cost to the employee?
There wouldn't have to, well, so it would, in any given year, we likely have an increase in the insurance, sometimes not. But it wouldn't be, we're able to manage the different levers of this program much more effectively to hopefully ensure that the increase would be much lower for the group, for the employer, and for the employees, if that makes sense.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, so let me say it a different way. With this type of program, we can negotiate when we're negotiating with United Healthcare today in your current program. We tell them what number they should come out with based on your claims data. And they usually get pretty close, and then we come down some, and then that's it. In this type of a program, we're able to negotiate, well, the administration we know is going to be far lower. So that brings the whole cost down quite a bit. The stop loss piece, we're able to negotiate that piece lower. So that brings that piece down quite a bit. And the claims, we're able to project the claims better in this type of arrangement. So in our next meeting, when I present this, we've actually done some analysis on the last 4 or 5 years of your program to see how much you all would have saved if you had been in this type of arrangement. And we've also been able to project it forward. So I guess my point is that we're better able to manage the different levers of this program to ensure that the renewals are more fair and more transparent.
But to the common person, the teachers, the people that's in the grind. So my thought process is, if we choose the partially funded, because you're jumping back and forth between self-funded and partially.
It's the same.
So same thing.
The same thing. Yeah. Sorry.
So if we choose the partially funded and you come from 800,000 to 30,000, so now the cost savings that typically means to me that everybody's premium is going to go up. And so now I'm going to be paying for my copays. I'm going to be paying $60 a copay instead of $25 a copay. That difference is what makes someone cringe as it relates to what their insurance looks like for the teachers.
Right.
You understand?
I do.
Okay.
If all those numbers come down that much, the premium should actually come down. If you're saving all this money, your premiums ideally would come down. And we don't have to change the copays at all. In fact, in almost all cases, when we move a group from fully insured to self-funded, we don't change the plan at all. The plan stays exactly the same for the employees. We're just able to take advantage of a lot of savings, and typically either keep the premiums flat or reduce the premiums. I will add that the claims experience that you all have had here at Lake Wales Charter Schools over the past 5 years has been extremely consistent and very low, which indicates to us that, and I'll share this with you all next time, that we have a very strong prediction that you all will do very well in this type of program based on your past claims history, which means that we should be able to keep premiums very flat or even reduce them over the next couple of years. Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea. If I can have Julio to come up to the podium for a moment, I want to put some context on the topic that we're actually discussing, because Andrea gave you an introduction presentation from USI over self-funding versus fully funded, but I want to talk a little bit, give you a historical perspective of where we've been in the last couple of years and what the administration, what we've actually done with respect to this. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
When I arrived in 2018, I believe our premium was about $3.7 million. Today, Julio tells me it's $4.4 million. Julio and I sat with our broker, and correct me if I'm wrong, Julio, he said we had like a 25% increase, projected increase. And we said, how'd you get this number? Because our claims were flat, like we should be doing good. And then we said, no, we're not going to sign that. And he came back and he offered, what did he offer, Julio?
He offered 19%
without talking to the insurance carrier. And we were like, he's just pulling numbers out. Like, we're not signing this. And we wind up with 5%.
Correct.
We agreed to 5%. And at that point, we were like, how'd you go from 25% to 5%? So it was like, okay, something's not right here. So at that point, we moved forward with the 5% that year, but we made it because I'm only like maybe 2 weeks on the job.
Correct, yes.
And you and the previous CFO had already negotiated with Brown and Brown. So I said to Julio, we're not going to do this again. And also, it's important to note that I don't know if it was the current year or the previous year, the services were actually being reduced.
Correct.
Right, for a higher premium. So in order to keep it flat, they had reduced the services. So we did meet Andrea in USI, and Andrea at that point came in like most brokers and presented that, hey, try all of these options. And of course, we were a little skeptical about it, all brokers at that point, because of what we had went through with this negotiation. And so we formed a relationship to discuss, to learn a little bit about insurance. The next year for renewal, Brown & Brown came back again with a very similar
I think again
situation.
with 25 again, or 20.
25 again. So we go through this situation again. And we said, no, I think Julio said flat.
Yes.
We're
did.
we're not going to do any increase. And he went back and forth. And then I called Andrea and she said, we won't accept the fee. We'll take a flat fee and we'll get you the flat premium. Okay. So we're in business now. Flat premium because I want to say Brown and Brown approached us. They came with a presentation and they presented all sorts of things to us. And Brown and Brown said, well, we haven't been raising your premiums high enough. In fact, 25% is not it. We haven't, and we can lower it this year, but then it'll jump up to 30 or 40% because we haven't been raising them high enough. And so at that point, we were done. We just moved on. So we moved on and we signed the same insurance package with USI that we were going to sign with Brown & Brown with a flat fee. And at that point, we start saying, okay, so how can we control or curve the increase in costs with respect to health insurance? And at that point, USI started introducing us to all of these vehicles, level funded, self-funding, fully insured, and we began to just talk about where our claims were, our percentage of claims were versus what we were actually paying. So all of the information that she's presented is basically her actually identifying all of the various costs related, built in those premiums. And the most appealing component of what was explained to us over time, well, let me back up for a moment. That same year, we built a health insurance committee.
Correct.
All of the schools were to send a representative, and we met quarterly. And if I'm not for certain, Uli, tell me if I'm wrong, I believe everyone were convinced that we should look at something different. All of the schools went back, spoke with their representative principals, and they come to the conclusion that if we can get the same level of quality of service at a flat rate, that we would be happy to engage or possibly look at self-funding.
That's correct.
Okay. So, and there was a reason for that, because Julio and I were negotiating roughly 11% of the budget alone. And we were having to make very serious decisions about how much should the emergency room cost be, or what type of deductible should be here and there. And I felt like, well, that's not right for us to make that decision. We should have a committee kind of help with that. And so when we went to our renewal, USI would come in, they would present, here's where your renewal is. If you want to make adjustments to what you're considering, to the various benefits that you receive, here's what the cost would be. I think at one year, the second year, I believe we actually made the plan a little more richer.
Correct.
For a very slight increase. It was less than 5%.
3%.
How much was it?
2 or 3%.
Yeah,
2
2
or
or 3%.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, what we've been able to do is make the plan more richer by looking at how we save costs. What Andrew is attempting to do is present to us options where as we go to market, we can begin to look at what things can we give up, or what can we make richer, or to be able to curb behavior, because healthcare is behavior, right? And we actually had to do that the first year. Julio, what did we do with respect to the emergency room visits?
We increased the copay just to avoid so many claims for pink eye or just fever, because not through emergency. So we had to increase that one and kind of low urgent care and provide virtual visit just to help the people just to go to more cheaper service. And also when I was going to the staff meeting, I talked to them and say, hey, you have to build a relationship with a doctor in the area, because sometimes we had a lot of just graduate and they probably, they young, they don't get any, they're not sick all the time. And then when actually have fever, they don't have a doctor to go. So where they go? To the ER. So, we're trying to educate on that piece, but try to, we say, kind of push that was, okay, we're going to increase the copay. So that way people say, I don't want to pay this amount. I'd rather just to wait or to go to this other place.
Right. So, and surprisingly, like Julio said, people get pink eye or they get the sniffles, they'll go to the emergency room. Obviously, it costs more, our insurance more. And so we had to increase that particular copay from $100 to $300.
Correct.
To actually curb the behavior. And it worked. I mean, unfortunately, we had to do that, but it worked. So as she mentioned, the levels that she's talking about is moving those levels in order to curb behavior. But overall, we look for the premiums to be flat or to control the increase in cost. Now, I know that she was very modest and said, well, we probably can bring the actual premiums down. We don't anticipate bringing them down. We anticipate just keeping them as flat as possible. And then, obviously we'll have some increase if we were to choose one of those models. But this was the introduction to the different types of insurance vehicles that we can participate in. Again, our health insurance is about 11% of our general fund budget, about $4.3 million. Our budget is a little bit over 36 million, correct, Melissa? Somewhere in there, 36 million. So what we have to do with a number that big is to analyze, how can we save or provide better coverage and better service for it. Is there any questions? Because we're going to have another opportunity, actually 2 more opportunities for USI to come back, talk to us a little more in detail, and we're going to get into the Lake Wales Charter School numbers in the November meeting as well as January. Any questions? Julio?
No, good. The only thing I just want to mention is to make an analogy for the board. Sometimes when you go to a restaurant, you want a special dish, right? And they said no substitution. So you're just going to get whatever that plate brings. If you like something, you take it. If not, you go with it. With the food insurance plan, that's the way you buy this dish or this dish or this dish. You cannot change anything. When you go to a partially self-funded, then you can say, okay, I want this meat with this, carb, with this soda, whatever. So you can customize the insurance better to better serve your population, and also, like before we had just to, if we were able just to increase one section, if you want to lower maybe the deductible, then you have to increase the copay, because that's the only option they give you. Or you want to, lower the deduction, then you have to increase the copay. Or you want to lower the copay, then you have to increase the deduction. So that's why, and the way the full insurance kind of work. With this case, it's more like a card type of thing. You say, okay, we would like this with this and this, how much this would be. And how Ricky said, well, we're trying as much as possible, at least to keep it flat, but also to have a more richer benefit for our staff. In case maybe we have to increase, that might happen, but we're trying to keep it, to control that increase and to provide a better insurance plan for our staff. And that's all I would say.
So the committee you mentioned, the healthcare, are they looking at this as well, or?
We haven't met probably since COVID. But the last time we met, actually, the committee wanted to move forward with the proposal to bring it before the board. At that point, they all voted in favor of bringing it before the board. But we've done extensive research, and I say that, thank you, Julio. I say we've done extensive research because initially we questioned whether this worked for school systems. Then we discovered that a lot of school districts, our size and smaller, actually are self-funded, and then a lot of nonprofits, because we were concerned about our revenue stream, how that would impact. So, and we took a field trip, myself, Melissa, and Health Services to Levy County, who has 9 schools and we have 11, so we're very similar in size. And just kind of walk through their self-funding and why they actually converted from fully insured to self-funding. They were facing 25 or 30% increases also, which forced them to kind of make some adjustments. So we, and that was about a year ago. Was it this year or when was it?
Last year, I think.
Was it last year? Because it wasn't COVID. It wasn't during COVID. So anyway, we've done some research on that, but we'll have more information in the month of November as we present the second round and possibly look at January for final presentation for vote. Any more questions on USI's presentation? Okay, we're going to move along to the budget policy. The budget policy document that's in your packet, and Ms. Stewart was chair of that committee, was charged with looking at the superintendent's discretionary. Ms. Stewart?
The committee met on September 23rd, 2021. We had about 7 people in attendance at that meeting, including myself and the superintendent. So you have a copy before you, the system-wide budget, which is laid out in accordance with the Florida statute. So the committee was charged with actually reviewing specifically Section 4 of that budget, which grants the superintendent discretionary spending authority to assign up to 15% of the general fund and special revenue fund to support system-wide initiatives. This is the section we determined to be the appropriate in order to give the superintendent the proposed spending discretion or authority to help with the low-performing schools as well as the athletic program in order to help bring them up to par as far as performance. In that meeting, we also discussed some examples of what we could probably do to help bring the schools programs up to par. And at this point, I'm going to just kick it down to the superintendent and let him talk about some of those examples.
Thank you. So I believe it was the August meeting where the chair at that point and vice chair was discussing how do we help low performing schools or schools that have special projects, special needs. There was a number that was proposed in terms of being able to assist 2 schools in particular, Janie Howard and Polk Avenue. And what we did is we decided, we don't have a budget policy overall, and it'd be nice if this would be laid out in the form of a budget policy that the superintendent will present, obviously, his budget overall, which would actually include that system-wide discretionary portion. And at that point, it will go before a vote, just like we do when we do the adopted budget as well as the amended budget. And the superintendent's budget would not exceed 15%. Currently, right now, the superintendent's budget with transportation, which is system-wide as well, along with the central office, is about 11%. So when you add on to the extra additional discretionary, we figured 15% was reasonable and up to 15%. And that means that the superintendent would, bring about that budget in great detail and lay out for the board to analyze all of these proposals. Obviously, the board could reject any portion of the budget if he or she sees fit. And then he will lay out that proposal, or he or she will actually lay out that proposal. So after talking amongst the committee and thinking about what we were trying to accomplish, that seems like a fairly reasonable number for us to be kind of maxed out. It also kind of puts some parameters around exactly how much funding is coming out of the schools. Right now, there's no parameters around it. We attempt to keep those costs as low as possible, but as you can see, we've already creeped up to above 10% right now when we consider transportation, which comes a great deal of those funds come out along with the central office. So this is a good way for us to kind of propose, for us to kind of look at how we give some flexibilities to the superintendent, but also prevent this thing from getting too far out of control. Any questions for me or Ms. Stewart?
All right, is the board's budget in that 11%?
The board's budget is in that 11%, and I think at the amended portion, what I may do is I may actually carve the boards out directly so the board actually can see it, because we have some new costs that we don't typically have, particularly driven by the superintendent search and some other things that we've done. We've had to have court reporters and things like that. So we typically don't build a board budget per se, but we have board spending. So, Mr. Chair, if you want to be mindful or have the board to be mindful of what those increased costs are, obviously we would kind of lay out what we anticipate and kind of schedule it out.
I would like to have that.
Okay. Any more questions on proposed? Okay. And I would be asking the board or Ms. Stewart would be asking the board for approval on this document during the regular session. As we move forward, I have two examples of what the system-wide initiatives actually would be, and I've asked two principals, Ms. Barcias, as well as Ms. Jacobs, to present the case support, and I'll let Ms. Jacobs go first if she had. Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Denise is here on behalf of Babson Park to present on the case support, and what I did is I went to one of the schools that actually were currently implementing the case support program. It was a program that we've had in the past, and what's happened is when we lost our funding from our donor, some schools were able to continue that and some schools weren't. And so this is an initiative that I think that, would warrant that discretion system-wide.
Okay, and I'm going to start with just a little bit of history. Over 25 years ago, the Babson Park community recognized the need for a program to more adequately prepare our children for school entrance. During the 1994-95 school year, the Little Nat Early Childhood Readiness and Support Program was initiated at what then was Babson Park Elementary. Led by the school administrators, kindergarten teacher Ms. Layton, retired educator Shirley Hodapp, and parental support, the program was funded by a variety of sources, including intervention services of Polk County Schools, Success by Six, which was a Jenkins family grant, and community development grants. Parents and children came to the school a couple of times each week to learn readiness skills, and for parents, how to help their child with the proper skills. The Little Nat Early Childhood Program then became a part of Babson Park Elementary as a kindergarten support program. Again, recognizing the need for additional skills for entering kindergarten students, this kindergarten support program was funded by a donor from Mountain Lake Estates for all of the elementary schools in our system. This program included a teacher and paraprofessional to work with targeted students to develop the essential language, literacy, and social skills needed for kindergarten. The program also included monthly parent nights, wherein the parents also learned additional skills to help their children. The Lake Wells Charter School elementary principals have continued to recognize the need for a program to more adequately prepare children for school entrance. Research shows that approximately 1/3 of students do not enter kindergarten with the appropriate language, literacy, and social skills needed to be successful. However, with this kindergarten support program, we feel that much of the success of our intermediate students at Babson Park Elementary can be attributed to the early intervention of kindergarten support. You have the project proposal in your packet. And you'll see the targeted students, the rationale, and the different components, the evaluation and assessment piece, the benefits, and the budgeting and supporting service of the IDEAL program. Any questions that I might be able to answer? And just so you know, our kindergarten support teacher tonight is hosting a kindergarten night at our school for her kindergarten support students and their families. And she's anticipating that there'll probably be about 20 people in attendance. So that's really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. So this is again, an example, and I did speak with Ms. Collins about starting this program up probably about 8 or 9 months ago. So we'll be looking at building a budget overall for all 4 programs and coming back to the board for consideration of that, for it being a system-wide initiative. And hopefully we'll have some donor support on that as well. The second example that I like to present would be the ESOL program from Ms. Anna Barcidas from Polk Avenue.
Hello, I'm Anna Barcenas, principal at Polk Avenue. And looking at the ESOL students, you can see on the infographic that you were provided, really just kind of an overview of our charter system as a whole. I think now, being that I was at the high school for 17 years and then now seeing an elementary perspective of it, I think that's been good for me to kind of soak some of that in. But I will tell you, when I was up here at the high school, it was always really heartbreaking to see ESOL students that were working so diligently, so hard, our ESOL paras and our teachers working hard to support them. And then unfortunately, they were unable to pass the FCAT or the FSA or that state assessment, and they were receiving certificates of completion, but their GPA sometimes were above a 3.5. So I think that was always a very heartbreaking moment. I was an intensive reading teacher for juniors and seniors. And that was always a hard day when the scores would come back. And so I think there's definitely opportunities for growth within our ESOL population and supporting them. I think it is something that we can start pouring into more at the elementary level and then all levels, truly. But I think at the elementary level, looking at, like at Polk Avenue, we have 2 ESOL paras that do a great job, and they have a very large population that they're working with. You can see here on the graph, Polk Avenue has 118 students that are labeled as LY students who are currently receiving services, 59 at Hillcrest, 71 at Janie Howard Wilson. We have some large populations that are being serviced by ESOL paras who are getting stretched thin. So there are some opportunities for ESOL teachers, additional ESOL paras, different programs to do a better job at supporting language development. And you can see in that graph, the LY students have all been identified and we're working on giving them services. And there is a breakdown of male and female. If you look below that and you look at the breakdown for all 4 of the elementary schools in the 2021 school year, 5.8% of our current 4th and 5th graders were proficient on the FSA test. Now, we know COVID is a part of that as well, but making sure that at a young age, we're helping those students not just survive their content of their classes, but actually helping them improve their language acquisition, writing, speaking, and reading skills. Middle school, that 18.3%. And then at the high school level, 28.3% of those students were in achievement level 2. So those are students that are really, they have not reached proficiency as deemed by the state yet. But that's a group that really could be targeted, get some support so that we can see those students finding success on those state assessments. And yes, we don't know the governor's changing that. So it's not FSA after this year. So we're kind of waiting for more information about that. But either way, we want to send these students out proud that they are bilingual, and we want them to, feel like they can be confident in their English language skills as well as their native language skills. The next graph talks about the students that are in like a 2-year follow-up. So it's very natural that the high school is going to have a high amount of students in that 2-year follow-up. If those students are needed to go back into that and get support, they can still receive some of that through a committee meeting. But we do see that some students are being exited from the program because they are meeting proficiency, but the high school has the most that they're still just watching and monitoring. We do receive some Title III funds at the various charter schools. Babson Park, because of their low population of ESOL students, they are not receiving additional support for their ESOL students this current school year. But you can see that Polk Avenue and Janie Howard Wilson were each receiving an additional pair, which will be a great help. Hillcrest, Bach Academy North, Bach Academy South, all 1 part-time tutors. And then Lake West High School, 2 ESOL part-time tutors. So we are trying to put people in place to support those students. But I think where we need to look at is those opportunities for growth And so you can see that kind of down at the bottom. WIDA and access testing is the testing that our ESOL students go through in the spring or around February. Kim Griffiths and I had a great meeting. She was kind of sharing some experiences she had with WIDA testing and how they utilize that to do different small group instructions with students. And I think if we become more intentional with that, that will help with our proficiency of our ESOL students. 3 of the elementary schools purchased Wonders, which is the reading program this school year. And it does have an ELL component to it. So I'm hopeful that that K-5 reading program and that ELL component will help support that. But just making sure that we're using this data to support our instruction. I think there's some ways that we can work with our ESOL families and our migrant lead to offer some more support to our ESOL families, some support, different community resources. And then we are very thankful to Polk County School Board and their partnership in helping us with our ESOL endorsement. But I think on top of that, what are some additional trainings that we can provide our staff that are trying to support these students, but then also those support staffs to make sure that the paras, the part-time tutors, that they feel confident in supporting these students in language acquisition and as well as content and translating the content for the students. So I think there's lots of opportunities. It does kind of depend on the school. I think different programs, different needs, the populations will fluctuate, but I think there are definitely some things that we can do, especially K-8, if they're in our system, that we can support that. So when they get to the high school, they're finding more success. So, but again, we want to embrace and support them in being proficient bilingual students in both languages. Because the long-term benefits for them to be bilingual as they become contributing citizens is great for them and their families. So lots of different things that you can do with ESOL, but I think we have to start somewhere. So I think using those WIDA test scores, doing small group, being intentional, and then the staff trainings are key. Thank you.
Thank you,
I don't know if you have
ma'am.
any questions.
So that was just 2 examples of what will be considered system-wide initiatives as Anna lays out some of the opportunities for growth. Obviously, it will require some resources, and we will look for the superintendent to actually propose a proposal with a budget together. The ESOL program, as Anna mentioned, is really more of a K-12 program, and that's the kind of the vision that she and I kind of talked about with that, and then working with all 7 schools in order to build it out, to support it. So that's just 2 examples. Again, maybe later on in the year, possibly November or January, we'll lay out a budget that kind of begins to support that for the remaining of the period. Any questions on that budget policy or those examples? Okay. As we move forward, we have Janie Howard Wilson in the PYP program by Ms. Griffith. This is a program that I think we've been trying to get it off the ground for a number of years. In fact, we've had some donor support. Even our general counsel's actually pitched in on this one as well to try to get this program going. So Kim's going to present to you the first of 1 or 2 proposals of what this could do to help Janie Howard increase not only its numbers in terms of its student growth, but also in its performance.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Griffiths. I'm the assistant principal at Janie Howard this year. Super excited about this program. I have been at Janie Howard since July, and I can tell you that this program is going to be what the staff and students really need to succeed. When looking at the first slide, I want to bring to your attention that it states that the primary years program focuses on the development of the whole child in the class and the world outside it. And right there it states that it meets the children's needs academically, socially, physically, emotionally, and culturally. And I want to tell you that's what our students need. They need to go ahead and have that social, emotional, and cultural connections to themselves, their community, and to the world. And that is what that primary years program thrives on. We go to the next slide. Being at Janie Howard and looking at the data of where the schools, where the students are currently at, it states that they have to be knowledgeable and caring and intercultural and respectful students. This program is going to go ahead and do this through projects, literature, and project-based programs. It really focuses on building an international focus. Looking at our Wonders curriculum from this year, it has a lot of stories from throughout the world, but the students don't have any prior knowledge. These students don't come from families where they are able to provide travel expenses and see the world. And with COVID, it's been such an impact with field trips and such. We really need to make those connections for them. This program will enable the students at Janie Howard Wilson to do that. Go to the next slide, please. I'm going to show you a video right here, and it states that the IB, the Primary Youth Program, the PYP, those words are used interchangeably. It really focuses on building a learner profile. It develops intrinsic skills within the learner to go ahead and so they become active, compassionate, and lifelong learners themselves. So if we can click on that video link, and then I'll elaborate more after the video. It's okay. So walking through it, it's going to show the communication skills that are needed. It's going to show that they're being responsible for their own learning. It's going to show the teachers interacting, getting group work involved, cooperative learning. It's going to show the, if Mr. Waldrop wants to go to the next slide. It will go ahead and show the skills and the profiles that they're going to learn to be cooperative, how to have commitment, creativity, empathy, respect, appreciation, confidence, curiosity, have tolerance, and independence. That's what that video was going to highlight. And it also highlights the whole mission and vision of Janie Howard Wilson herself. I've been on a mission, and when you look at the organizations that she was attached to, she in fact encompassed a lot of that herself. And that's what I want to instill with our students at Janie Howard. And I feel like this program is going to provide the training our staff needs to do that. We can go to the next slide. The students are going to learn to develop those learner profile skills by making connections, thinking critically, working collaboratively, and building the conceptual understandings by reflecting and doing a lot of multi-perspectives. One of the things I noticed when looking at this is our teachers are going to need the training because there are 6 themes that are going to help the teachers build this understanding. We are going to have to reorganize our curriculum maps. And we're also going to have to develop this way of teaching with our teachers where they become more the facilitator. They'll actually make that connection with their evaluation system with Marzano that they're currently using now and actually really apply it through the skills, strategies, and lessons with this program. And that's just recapping the theme about who we are. They're really going to take a self-reflecting look on who that is. They're going to look at their place in their time. They're going to look how do they express themselves, the way that the world works, how to organize themselves. And of course, there's a big emphasis on sharing the planet. While they're doing their units of inquiry, there's always going to be these questions. What does it look like? How does it work? How is it changing? These students need to be able to not answer these questions in one formal thinking. Oftentimes, we're looking for students to do one answer, and instead, they want the students to communicate in multiple ways. For example, at one of the trainings I went to, they recently had a glass jar filled with objects, and the students had to go ahead and figure out what is the purpose of having all these objects together? How does this connect? And not only did they have to give one answer in a sense of what is the theme, but express it in a color, express it in a picture, and express it with words. So they had to express it in different ways. And if you think about it, we live and work in a multifunctional world, and that often happens. And then finally, sorry, David. They're going to go ahead and learn self-management skills, research skills, social skills, community skills, and thinking skills. And in the last video, it really shows that the students are able to reflect, make informed choices, and take action to help their peers, school, and their community. But I really feel like a lot of this is going to help our students develop the learning profiles that the founder of the school already has done in her community a long time ago. Any questions?
So, Kim, when me and you talked,
Yes.
one of the concerns I had, well, not a big concern, but just educating that community, of the kids that come to Janie Howard Wilson. And you mentioned to me that the attendance was lower than it was previous years and they're going to other places. Is this something that will appeal to the parents to say, hey, this is an IB program here, bring your kids back, or is it going to be intimidating to them?
I would think with the education that we do with the community and the community churches and the outreach and connecting it to the historical component of the school, using Janie Howard Wilson as an example, where she was such a involved person in the community with the organizations, and she encompassed a lot of those same skills that the primary years program is focusing on. The primary years program is focusing on building those same characteristics. It's about developing the learner. It's not necessarily about developing, we want that high academic achieving, of course, but it's about developing that intrinsic, giving back to the community, making myself an academic scholar while giving back.
Any additional questions for Ms. Kim?
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Kim. That's the first proposal of the Janie Howard Wilson's PYPIB program. Kim and I will work on a budget proposal for the board to consider because it will require a substantial commitment, not only in resource from a treasurer standpoint, but also time and energy. And Kim and I spent a lot of time talking about the personnel, the investment that we'll have with personnel in terms of what type of personnel be required in order to actually pull this off. So we'll come back again in November and speak a little bit closely to the numbers and see if we can get the board to help engage this project. I would like to say before we get into, before I move on to the next thing, that if you notice that in Nancy's presentation, the auditor, that Janie Howard had the highest percentage of fund balance. I think their fund balance is about 72% of their revenues, which typically should be around 10%. So the school has more than enough resources to support these type of initiatives. If there's no more questions, we're going to move on to the HR gifted sick leave and salary schedules. Dr. Julio.
Good evening. What I have for you presenting the sick leave gifting policy. We have had this policy since we opened the doors, but we are revising the policy just to put some parameters into it. We never have before specific how much time the person can donate, and it was and the amount the person can receive was a really high number, was almost $1,200. $300 hours. So what this is, it was still allowing people to give sick time to another individual who run out of time, especially due to sickness or a death of a close relative, even though we had the bereavement policy, but this is additional to that. But one of the main changes is on letter A, number 4, we say the maximum amount that the person can donate in a school year is 40 hours. WeAway has the minimum, which is 8 hours. This also protect a person who's donated time to keep at least 80 hours for themselves. And also, any labor employee who the maximum amount of hours they can receive in a school year, or not a school year, but in a period of 12 months, is actually 480 hours. Any question about this sick leave gifting policy? Okay. The next thing we have, I know in spring we I presented driver's salary schedule at the time, but after that time, I think people around were looking what we are offering, so the market came a little bit higher. So we had to revise it again to be more competitive and try to get more drivers, which I believe we have a new driver starting this week and another one coming up soon. So we are getting there. So we are revising this driver side schedule again. It was starting at 1363, I believe. Now would be 1450, and then move on about 1.5% all the way down. Any question about that one or comment? The next side schedule I have is for school assistant principal. This one is also a placement schedule in case we had a AP applying for any position coming from outside, have certain years of experience. You will see only on middle school and elementary school, we had the auction for 11 and 12 month. We have one AP in elementary school who's 12 month currently, and most of the other one are 11 month. And in middle school, we have two who are 11 month and one that is 12 month. Normally in high school, we only had 12 months APs. So that's why you don't see 11-month auction in there. In case that come on, it would be just recalculation based on whatever side it would be for 12 months, whatever equalized to 11 months at the time. But normally it would be only 12 months for APs, assistant principal. Any comment about this one or question? Behind the APs, we have a principal, I call it salary range, more than in schedule. We see elementary would be between 90,000 to 115, middle school would be between 96,000 to 121, and high school would be between 102 to 127. And this would be determined at the time the person be hired or promoted to principal position. It would be based on experience. It would be education and training, the population of the school they're working, the performance of the school they've been assigned, and also the market rates at the time when the person we offer the position. Any question or comment about this salary range for principal? Lastly, but not least, also proposing a substitute pay raise increase. I'm going to share with you a little bit the background. So Lakeville Charter School currently employ 41 daily sub teachers. Pre-COVID-19, the system employed approximately about 80 daily sub. So COVID has also a negative impact on the recruitment effort, and with the position rate dropping from 83% to 64.1% now. Also, the substitute teacher rate at this time is $11 per hour, and the minimum wage just start at $10 per hour. So filling instructional position also becoming extremely difficult. In August of 2021, Kelly's Educational Services, which is a temporary increase of substitute pay to $105 per day, which is equal to $14 per hour. Kelly Services is the main substitute teacher staffing group in Florida, and they provide services at Polk County School Board and others around the district. I think almost the whole Florida are using them. So we're proposing is to, in effort to be more competitive with the market, and we propose to do a substitute teacher hourly rate up to $14 an hour starting in November to match Kelly Services, which the impact it will have with the system is it would help with recruitment and retention of the sub teachers who are employed by Lakeville Charter School with less likely to leave Lakeville Charter School to work for Kelly Services. But this also could represent an additional annualized expenditure of 27% increase on the substitute teacher line compared with 2021 school year. This plan would be reevaluated during summer in case the board approve it. And we're going to revise the substitute teacher rate, and we reassess it at the time. It's a possibility based on the market that maybe the substitute teacher rate may increase on 22-23, but that would be evaluated at that time. And of course, I'm going to be coming back to the board and present what would be that adjustment. Any question about this piece or any comment? Okay, thank you.
As we look at the, all of our benefits, and then we went through insurance and now Julio's going over salary schedules. We just have to be mindful that this labor market is tough. And, we're suffering now with, shortage of drivers, bus drivers. I think we're down eight drivers, correct? Transportation director. And the schools are, reminding us daily of how short they are with substitutes. So we're doing everything we can to try to attract folks to come and participate and work with us, without, breaking the bank. So, thank you, Julio.
Thank you, sir.
Continuing on, we have House Bill 641. And in the legislative session of 2020, the governor signed House Bill 641, which is the teacher salary increase allocation plan. And it's been an experiment, I'll say that, the least, to get salaries for starting pay for salaries for teachers up to 47.5, or that which is reasonable or that we can actually accomplish. We last year we were able to set our salaries at 47,250, and I think we received from the FEFP, or the Florida Education Finance Program, an additional $731,000 to kind of support bringing those salaries up. This year we estimate to receive about $831,000, so roughly about $100,000 more. And our attempt is to raise our salaries. We'd like to get to 47.5. Obviously, we want to get as closely as we can to the figure, but we were able to actually raise that number up to 47,375 with the increases that we have so far. Of the $831,000, 80% has to be placed at the beginning salary level, and 20% for those full-time instructional staff. The 20% of the resources can actually be placed closer to the other instructional staff folks. So every year, based on what the law is indicating, the board is required to actually propose what its expenditures or what its salary, base minimum salary would be, proposed to the Florida Department of Education for them to turn into the governor. And so what we'll be doing is asking the board for approval for the salary allocation plan that's presented in front of you. And so, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Superintendent, the bottom, it says full-time classroom teachers, instructional personnel. So the teachers that are above the 47.5, is that, wanted to be clear, is that 300, is that annual?
That's going to be 300, and well, it's going to be 300 annual to the best of our ability. Now, the law is a little tricky, and Julie and I spend probably 2 hours a day arguing about the law and how to interpret it, because the way it's kind of written, it's written as if we can raise it, but if it's not funded in the future, how does it say? Julie, help me out with that language. Basically, unless the legislature tells us that we can actually lower it.
It says the legislature may annually provide.
Right.
So, but we cannot decrease, if we hit 47.5, we cannot decrease classroom teachers at 47.5. We can decrease other areas of teachers.
There you go.
Non-classroom teacher.
So basically, we can't decrease the base minimum of 47.5 once we arrive there. But other folks that receive the 300 and above, if it's not funded, we can reduce that unless the Lake Wales Charter School System decides to fund it with other monies. So, any more questions on? Okay. Again, this will be, this plan will be, we'll need to get this plan approved to submit to the Florida Department of Education. Okay, next up, we have our cleaning management service contract for our system-wide cleaning, and Ms. Hayward will be presenting that.
Good evening. I'm Angela Hayward, the Director of Federal Programs for Lake Coast Charter Schools. In your packet is the contract between Lake Coast Charter Schools and CMS Cleaning Solutions. Just a little background knowledge. During our last school year, we had 3 different companies cleaning our schools, and resulted in 2 schools having to go to market just to get the summer cleaning done. With the CARES 2 funding, the opportunity arose to have some continuity of cleaning at all 8 locations. So we went to market, allowed the school leaders to assist in finding someone to clean the schools. We vetted a contract, had general counsel to review, and we proposed this evening to have you approve our contract, and we had to bring it before the board because of the cost of the annual contract. Just some highlights. That cost will include daily cleaning at all 8 locations, which includes the central office, all paper products and soaps in the soap dispensers. The company provides their own cleaning supplies, deep cleaning during the summer, and also the winter cleaning and the stripping and waxing of the floors twice a year. Are there any questions?
Total cost of that contract?
Is $692,799.96 annually.
Any questions on this contract or the procurement of it? We're actually in the 90-day phase, right?
Yes.
We're in the 90-day phase of it. I believe we did bring it before the board earlier. The discussions of it,
Yes.
we didn't ask for approval on it.
Right, we talked about it.
How does this contract amount compare to what we've done in the past with the multiple different organizations we've had?
Well, it's a little difficult to determine because in the past, schools have actually negotiated based on what they could afford. So, and we had, I believe it was Janie Howard, didn't have a cleaning service at all. So the teachers were doing it last year, and they were just doing the best that they could in order to get by. And then I think Babson Park is here. They actually had a reduction in services as well due to what they could afford. So it's not really comparable because some folks really just kind of got rid of it because they just couldn't afford it.
Understandable.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
Okay, well, we spent quite a bit of time on finance. The financial statements are as presented. Personnel is as presented as well. I don't think we have anything in there that's striking, but I'll be glad to go through anything in here. I won't spend a lot of time. We've been talking about quite a bit here, and Nancy did a pretty good job with the presentation of our 630 financials. I will say that for folks that are really interested in the bottom north, status of that deficit, we can get into that, in another work session, possibly in November. I'll break it down. And Ms. Drism, I know she wanted to be present as well to kind of speak about some of the changes that we'll make, as we move forward, and talk a little bit about some of those costs that possibly drove to that deficit. Is there any questions on the finance this month? I won't read through that analysis. And again, like I said, personnel is as presented on that page. I think we got a couple ESOLs out of field, but other than that, yes, sir. Julio's going to present on the personnel
Make
point.
a quick comment here, just for evidence purpose, in case we had an audit or something. So Ryan Nichols, who is being rehired at Lakewood High School, He's going to start. He's going to be a social study teacher. So he's out of field. He's certified in English, but he's going to be teaching social story. I just want you guys to be clear in case we had an audit for FTE. There evidence that this was bring to you attention to the board because you have to prove that position. That's all. Thank you.
Any more questions on the personnel? Okay. Great. We're going to move on to Florida School Board Association, Mr. Goldstein. Messina. Ms. Messina is actually present to talk about the superintendent search timeline.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for having me speak to you tonight. Mr. Gill, Mr. Gibson, my senior member and partner from the old commission, Ms. Stewart. We met this afternoon from 1 to 3 o'clock, exactly 3 o'clock, and we went over the schedule for interviewing the prospective clients or prospective applicants for the school superintendent job. Now, one of the things I like to start with that we have on our calendar, which I think you've all seen earlier, the February 9th, 10th, and 11th will be the dates that we're bringing the candidates in for your individual interviews. And we'd like the School Superintendent Association and our committee would like you to commit. It's a full-time day, 3 days in a row, 9th, 10th, and 11th of February. We're going to be successful. We need these dates unless tonight you'd like to change those dates, and we have the School Superintendent Association here to work it out with you all. If not, we'd like to keep those dates. On those dates, candidates will be coming in on the 9th. We are looking for, and I've talked to the City of Lake Wales about sponsoring a dinner for them and the trustees and their families. We haven't picked a site yet, but that would be the night of the 10th. That would be the second day of the interviews. As they come in on the 9th, and I believe we'll start taking them on tours. Rob Ohm, the Care Center, is going to arrange the tours of the schools in the cities, of the businesses and all in the city. We are looking for sponsors to sponsor a breakfast in that morning of the 10th, and I will be talking to the new director of Advent Health to see if they would like to sponsor it. And also we're looking for a boxed lunch for the 10th, and possibly we'll get with the Chamber of Commerce to do that. We discussed today the Sunshine Law and how we have to operate as a committee. And as of today, we are under the law. And until the day before you appoint the new school superintendent, will remain under that law. We will not be discussing it with anybody, including the school board, who is under that law also. If you need any other specifics, I'll be happy to bring them up. Sure. John?
Yep. Superintendent Smith and board members, thank you for having us this afternoon. I just wanted to kind of clarify on those 3 February dates, the February 9th, 10th, and 11th. Those 3 dates we put aside, assuming that this board may interview up to 5 finalists. It will take 3 days if we look at anything beyond that. So the actual 3 days, candidates, depending on the number of finalists you select, and I'll work on a schedule to bring that back to you at a future meeting. There's a chance that the candidates could come in on Wednesday. Let's assume you pick 3 finalists to bring in for interviews. Then they would come in on a Wednesday. we could possibly do the tours on Thursday as you are interviewing one of the finalists. The other two finalists are doing tours, and we'll kind of do a rotation there. So depending on the number of finalists, it could be 3 full days or it could be 2 days. So we just wanted to put these dates out that you do, we would certainly respectfully ask that you put aside that time in case 3 days are needed. The concept would be, again, I'll just take an example. If you have 3 finalists, the finalists will arrive out of area, will come in on a Wednesday, the 9th. That Thursday, the board would interview a finalist as a total sitting body for an hour and a half. While you're interviewing, say, the first candidate, the other 2 candidates would be doing school community tours that Mr. Gom would be working on with other possible members of the screening committee. As you finish your first interview with candidate A, then candidate B would be coming in from his or her interview or tours. You would interview candidate B. And then after you finish with candidate B, candidate C would come in for your third interview. That evening, we could have the dinner that Mr. Al referenced. We could also set up a community meet and greet, possibly here at the high school, if that would be something you would like to consider, having the community come and meet your finalists that Thursday evening. Then on Friday, that would be the time that, as board members, you would interview each finalist one-on-one. Those would be sessions with you and just each individual finalist that you would interview for about 45 minutes one-on-one, and we'll work some schedules out. So that's kind of the overall concept of your interviews as a total body on the first day with each candidate. Some activities that afternoon, evening, and then Friday you have a one-on-one. And of course, your Thursday interview as a total body would be open to the public. Your interviews one-on-one would not be. So if there are any kind of thoughts you might have on that concept, certainly we would like any input you might have, and I'll kind of start building some schedules that can make that approach workable and bring back to you at a later board meeting.
For those of you who know me, John is a lot more diplomatic than I am. I like to give it straight on. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I could, also, we're finished with our sunshine training now for the screening search committee. So I will be sending them the 6 applications that we have to date. As you know, we posted about a week or so ago. The advertisement will close November 12th. There are 6 candidates that have submitted complete application packets. I will send that to the search committee this evening when I return home. I'll also send it to Ms. Hayward. She will post it to your superintendent search website. It's good to post it there so your community can keep up and access with who's coming in and have a feel for the candidates. We also will get it to Ms. Gray so she can send those packets directly to you tomorrow morning. So you'll have the packets as our search committee receives them as well, and as they go up on your website. Yes, sir.
I think it would be helpful too for the board to maybe think about doing some of the sunshine training like the committee had, especially for the 2 new board members that are coming in, and especially how this as the sunshine law relates to the search itself.
David, I have some scheduled trainings coming up actually for the board. And that actually maybe I'm gonna get with Carol on that for school board to come back with that same training we had before, and then introduce some more training. So yes, sir, we'll get those going.
Chairman Gill, just as a consensus, so the concept of the board interviewing individually and then the individual interviews, that's a concept that I can kind of move forward with and build a schedule for.
What's the board consensus on that? Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Any more questions on that topic? I'm gonna add another topic that's not actually on this agenda, and I'm gonna give General Counsel an opportunity to brief us on any legal updates. And my apology for not allowing the council to actually be part of this, but he may have something that he wants to state.
There are some developments as far as the Barrow litigation is concerned. The mediation that the board authorized occurred, and the three representatives that you authorized to go appeared, and that was Al Ricky Smith and Andy Oguntola and myself. The mediation occurred in the conventional way in the mediation facility. Unfortunately, our mediator was required to go to an arbitration that afternoon that he had not planned on. And so our mediation was suspended, and we thereafter conducted negotiations by phone over something like a 2-week period. And during that time, there were a couple of shade meetings that you all are familiar with. So all of those meetings are confidential. The subject matter, the discussions of the mediation are confidential. There are only a few public documents, but they do reveal what is happening, or at least a couple things that are happening. One of the public documents is a motion by the charter schools and done by our attorney for the insurance company, a motion to enforce a settlement. The idea that a settlement has occurred. The hearing on that motion will occur Wednesday. The plaintiffs, the Barrow side, is proceeding as if there had not been a settlement. And so there came before the court, and the court said there would be, on Wednesday, he would hear the proposal to enforce a settlement agreement. And then he would also authorize depositions to occur on Friday. Those depositions were noticed for Jesse Jackson, Al Ricky Smith, myself, and Dr. Acevedo. So I don't believe, since Dr. Jackson is a resident of Leon County now, that he can be compelled to come to Polk County for that deposition. So, but the three of us are ready and available. And right now, that's all I can say about the progress.
Any questions? Yes, sir. I'm going to move this along. Superintendent's report, Board of Trustee work session meeting September 8th, September 16th, and obviously we'll be looking at the minutes for September 20th as well. Be presented for your review and approval in the next session here coming up. And then our next meeting date here is the work session finance meeting at 4:00 here at the high school, Monday, November 29th, in the auditorium. Any other business that any of folks may have that we can discuss in this work session?
I want to make sure that next meeting date's the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend. Is that
That's correct.
going to be a
It's
problem with any of the trustees? Just wanted to ask before we.
Okay, thank you, sir. That concludes the work session, and I think we can take like 5 minutes and get right into, anyone needs 5 minutes, or you can?
5 minutes or move on? Since
Okay.
we're already a little over half an hour, we'll just move
Sorry.
on.
All right.
Oh, you're good.
I'm good.
There's a lot of information, a lot to cover, so we appreciate that. For those of you that were waiting on the meeting to start at 5:30, I apologize. We had a lot of material to cover today, and it was all good content. So, with that being said, I want to call the meeting to order. Mr. Quam, would you lead us in invocation and pledge, please?
Everybody, please stand.
Father, thank you for this great community. We thank you for all the ways that you allow us as your community servants to help make life better here for our neighbors. Father, specifically in this setting, we thank you for the children and youth of our community. We trust that you would continue to use this board and their wisdom, that you would guide them, direct them as they make tough decisions and look at what we've heard already today, some very exciting opportunities to help enhance the lives of those children that you have entrusted into us. Father, we pray for our educators, administrators, teachers, the support staff, that you would continue to give them encouragement and inspiration each day as they come in to serve as well. And for our children and youth, that you would protect them, that you would continue to use us to nurture them and to help them to grow into productive citizens. All these things we commit into your hands, in your precious and holy name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Quam. The next item on the agenda is the nominating committee report. We have 2 vacant seats that we've entrusted to a very thorough and committed committee that was led by Marcus and had Melissa Ard and Chief Velasquez. So I'll turn that over to you, Marcus.
So he told you about the committee consisted of Chris and myself and Melissa. And so we had 2 seats to fill. And so we sent out emails to the SAC committees and to the PTO committees. And we gave them a deadline to present some nominees. And so we took all that in consideration. We reviewed them, and 3 actually rose to the level of what we wanted or what we were looking for as it states in the bylaws, the recommendations. And so those 2 candidates were Rusty Ingley and Lori Hutto. And so Rusty, with the board approval, will be filling seat 3, and Lori, with the board approval, will be filling seat 4.
Thank you, Marcus. Trustees, you have a presentation and asking for approval on 2 nominees for board seats. I'll entertain a motion or questions.
I move for approval as presented.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. One added thing to that, there were a few other very qualified candidates that came forth through SAC committees and different groups that, according to our bylaws, and I just want to throw this out so we can talk about it at another meeting, but according to our bylaws, under governing body article 4 section 3, it said all voting trustees must reside within the attendance zones for Lake Wales area schools. I think one of those candidates was in Winter Haven, is that correct? And so they were kind of not disqualified, but set aside until we can clarify, is Winter Haven our attendance zone, and, do we want to keep it in there must? It kind of handcuffs us on some of those issues. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because that was a discussion item, and we can put that on another agenda date and talk about that. Okay.
I can answer the question about the attendance zone. The attendance zone is the high school attendance zone. It does not go to Winter Haven.
The question is we're busing from Winter Haven, so
that the way it stands right now, it's the Lake Wales attendance zone. The Lake Wales attendance zone, when we started the charter schools, it overlapped with McLaughlin. And there's a map that the district had, and that was the attendance zone.
Gotcha.
Does not go to Winter Haven.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry. I guess the question that even the committee had was, do we want to look at changing that in the future, or broadening that, because we are accepting students from other areas. And so that means that if those students are coming in from other areas, then those other areas may need to be represented as it relates to board members. And that's why we brought the question up.
And as far as the amendments go, one of the things that I thought the bylaws should be easy to amend, majority vote.
Thank you. Marie, do we have any scheduled persons to address the board on any agenda items? Okay. Any folks that want to address the board on agenda items at this point? Okay. Seeing none. Financial report.
Yes, sir. I'm asking for approval as presented. Again, be glad to go through any of the presentations from the monthly financial statements for October. And then, like I said, in the next work session, we can get into other financial or accounting issues that the board may be interested. But for now, I'm asking for approval for the October financial statements as well as personnel changes.
Okay. Trustees, any questions for CFO? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the monthly financials.
I'll move for approval as presented.
I have a motion.
I second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Al Ricky?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I have a couple documents. I don't know if you want to take them motion by motion here.
So we've got personnel changes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was actually, well, you just did the financials. Personnel changes for approval?
Yep.
As presented?
Personnel changes as presented, seeking approval.
So moved.
I have a motion.
A second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Superintendent?
Thank you. My apologies again. Budget policy that Ms. Stewart actually presented for superintendent discretion, but actually it's a little bit deeper than just the superintendent's discretion. It's the overall budget policy, asking for board approval.
Any questions on the budget policy? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Give me 1 second. Go ahead. I missed it. On that annual budget, system-wide budget thing, number 5.
Mhm.
It's, so each year, are we looking at each year, they'll have to come before the board to get approval, or the superintendent it wouldn't be ongoing? Is that what I'm reading? Am I reading that correctly?
You're correct. Each year for each fund is actually, we bring about a budget for approval. Number 4 was the one that we added in, which is a little unusual. That gives the superintendent a little carving out for special initiatives as what was presented by Babson Park's team as well as Polk Avenue's team.
So, but the initiatives for that 15% or that general fund, even the initiatives that's carved out, even that it would be ongoing.
No, that's an annual budget.
Okay.
Presentation.
Further questions? I'll entertain a motion if not.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any further questions, discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Gifted and sick leave policy as presented.
I'll move to approve as presented.
I have a motion.
A second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Our salary schedules as presented.
So move.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Superintendent?
Yes, the 2020, 122 teacher salary initiative, House Bill 641 as presented.
Move for approval.
I have a motion for approval.
A second.
A second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. I look for approval for the CMS contract, to finalize the contract as presented.
So move.
I have a motion to approve the CMS contract.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Superintendent search timeline as presented by Mr. Goldstein and that search committee.
Move for approval as presented.
A second.
I have a motion and a second for approving the superintendent search timeline. Any further discussion or questions on it? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Got one quick addition I want to bring up. I know it's off subject a little bit, but for the next meeting, it doesn't involve the superintendent, but it does. I would like to have on the agenda for next month, possibly discuss doing a multi-year contract for our CFO. I think that would help us in continuity and flow through the process beyond the hiring of a new superintendent. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. It was a last minute thought just now. So if we can put that on the agenda for next month, I'd like to at least discuss it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry about that. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Minutes, the Board of Trustees work session minutes, September the 8th meeting, the September 16th, as well as the September 20th. We had a lot of meetings in the month of September. Presented as for approval.
So move.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. Are we doing those independently, Marie, or all as one set? Okay, all right.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion or questions on the minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Board of Trustees work session, finance meeting, 4 p.m. And then the actual meeting is actually at 5:30, November 29th, Lake Wells High School. And we're going to try to stick to those times this time. Next one.
We had a lot to talk about, so it's understandable. Do we have any scheduled persons to address the board on non-agenda items? No one scheduled? Anyone from the floor? Chairman's report. I really don't have anything else to say. Trustees.
Okay, thank you.
I'm good.
I'm good, thank you.
Everybody's talked out. Okay. Any other business for the good of the cause? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.